Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska Weather. As always, you can call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means. You can also check out our website at weather.gov/Alaska. Get any updates to the forecast through there as well. And you can check out any watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. Taking a look now at some of those advisories and warnings. We'll start off here in the south central area, just covering the Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, and Matanuska Valley. We have winter weather advisories for snow for the more northern locations and a winter storm warning for snow for the Matanuska Valley. All of those are going to start sometime this evening into the night, and they're going to last into early parts of tomorrow, bringing a lot of snow to the south central area. As we move further to the north, we have a whole bunch of warnings still out. All of those are winter storm warnings covering anywhere from the west coast, St. Lawrence Island, all through the interior to the eastern parts of the interior, including the Brooks Range and the northwestern portions of the Arctic coastline. Now, the vast majority of those are active right now, and most of them are also for snow and blowing snow, bringing some blizzard-like conditions to areas, especially out west, and more down to about a half mile for areas as we get further off to the central and eastern parts of the interior. And those are going to last anytime into Saturday. A lot of them are going to start to expire Saturday morning, but for the far eastern ones, those are going to last as late as noon on Saturday. And we also have around the Norton Sound area, anywhere from the Bering Strait area all the way through the Sound down to the coastline of the Yukon Delta. And for St. Lawrence Island, we have coastal flood warnings that are now active for those locations. And those are active from 3 a.m. on Friday until 9 a.m. on Saturday. The biggest threat here is going to be areas around the southern part of the Seward Peninsula, including Nome, where that long southwest and westerly fetch can break up some of that ice and even push some of it on shore. So look out for that if you're in those areas. And also for the areas on the south and west sides of St. Lawrence Island could see similar effects there, with the exception of some of the ice getting thrown up, because a lot of that warmer air is breaking up the ice or melting that ice. So not a lot of that should be anywhere near the shoreline, but there are going to be some coastal flooding issues along the shoreline, especially on the west and southwest areas. Moving into our satellite imagery so we can check out what is causing all of these problems. We'll start up here with our main low pressure center that is going to track further off to the east to the far northeastern parts of Russia. We can now see our main frontal system our cold frontal system as it's pushing through the Bering Sea. Behind that, we can see a lot of the colder air with a lot of more convective clouds coming in, a mixture of rain and snow in those showers. As we look out over mainland Alaska, we'll look at the warm front part of this system as it's pushing across mainland Alaska, with cloud cover extending now all throughout the mainland, bringing in a lot of warmer air with that system. And then finally, we'll take a look down here in the Panhandle area. Not a lot of cloud cover, a little bit more into the interior locations with some lingering showers around the area of the Panhandle. But as we look now for the remainder of today, a lot of those should stay off to the north and east, maybe a few pushing into areas away from the Gulf. But as we move out over mainland Alaska, we can see the main push of the front, bringing in a lot of snow cover to all places of the interior part of Alaska, especially as we get further out towards the west, where we have a lot of snow and blowing snow conditions with a lot of the stronger winds that are also associated with this front. We even had some reports of structural damage in the Kotzebue area, with winds getting up to 60 miles per hour. We also had some power outages in the Kotzebue area. And that is also a good note that if you want to visit our website, again, that is weather.gov/Alaska, you can submit spotter reports to us, and that'll let us know what's happening in your area. For all areas of the mainland, especially in these blowing snow and blizzard-like locations, we'd like to know what's going on with you guys, so if you could let us know, we would greatly appreciate that. Anyway, back to the weather. Along the Arctic coastline, we are expecting continued snow for the remainder of the afternoon into the evening. With this warmer air coming up from behind our warm front, we are seeing some of that snow transition over to freezing rain and eventually to rain, especially in the Bristol Bay area. And then for Kodiak as well, we are going to see some of that rain. Out across the Bering Sea behind our cold front, we do have some showers coming in that are starting to transition back over to snow with that colder air coming in from the west. And you can see the beginnings of our system moving towards the western Aleutian Islands. As we move into tonight, that system is going to push more into the western Bering, bringing some rain and snow to places of the western Aleutian Islands. We also have some high pressure building in from the south, starting to make its way towards the Aleutian Islands. And then we have westerly flow continuing all throughout the mainland, bringing more snow, albeit a little bit lighter than what we saw for much of today. Unless you're in the south central area where a lot of the heavier snow is going to pick up overnight. Over parts of the eastern interior through the western interior, we're going to continue to see those blowing snow conditions with stronger winds, especially over hilltops and summits. Higher elevations are going to see the strongest of the winds and the worst blowing snow conditions. Along the Arctic coastline, we're going to see some snow up there as well. And then as we get closer towards the Gulf, a little bit warmer there, going to see some of that rain lingering around areas like Kodiak Island. And then in the Panhandle, we are going to see a mixture of rain and snow, where areas closer to the Gulf are going to see most of the rain, whereas areas further away from the Gulf and at higher elevations are going to see more snow for tonight. Moving into Friday, we have a new low forming near the Yakutat area that is pushing more of the rain into the Panhandle area, but some locations, especially up by the Skagway area, are going to see primarily snow as that happens on Friday. Over mainland Alaska, going to continue to see a lot of that westerly flow, bringing in more snow throughout the interior. South Central going to be a little bit more protected from that snow as this high pressure pushes in from the south, but the majority of mainland Alaska going to see more of that snow. Still strong enough winds throughout much of the interior to see blowing snow conditions. Again, that is going to be the worst on top of the hills and for the summits. Then along the Arctic coastline, going to see some snow lingering around. And we had our low over the western Bering, now pushing through the Bering Strait area, bringing back more heavy snow to the Seward Peninsula and up through the Kotzebue Sound area. But that high pressure also building in through much of the Bering Sea out over the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, pushing off a lot of the precipitation in those locations. But we have another low coming up from the south, bringing a rain and snow mixture to the western Aleutian Islands. And as we watch this system come in, it's going to get ramped up by strong jet support and going to be even stronger as it moves into the Bering Sea, bringing in another really strong push of warm air out over the Bering, bringing rain back to the Pribilof Islands. But behind that cold front, going to get colder again as would be expected, bringing some snow showers back in with that rain. But the warm front part of this system going to bring up a lot of moisture from the south, bringing snow back to all locations from the west coast, from the Bristol Bay area, all the way up through the Kotzebue Sound area, expecting more snow on Saturday. A high pressure will have moved off to the east, keeping much of mainland from the central interior locations out towards the east. Keep that snow away from those areas, with the exception of way far out along the eastern interior border. We are going to see some light snow out there. Panhandle area should be kept out of the precipitation with this high pressure as well on Saturday. For our temperatures as of 2 p.m. this afternoon, we do have primarily in the 30s or mid to upper 30s for the Panhandle area, 33 there at Yakutat. As we move to the south central locations, in the teens for interior locations, with the exception of the Copper River Basin, seeing single digits. As we get along the North Gulf Coast, in the mid-20s there, and then 36 for Kodiak City. As we move up into the interior, warmer as we get off to the west, but as we push towards the east, dropping down into the single digits, with Fort Yukon being the coldest there at -15 this afternoon. Along the Arctic coastline, we do have temperatures primarily below zero from Barrow and further to the east, but with the warmer air coming up from the south, locations along all the west coast are going to be above zero. And as we get down into the Norton Sound area, even above freezing, with that strong push of Warm air from the South Gamble sitting at 31 as of 2 p.m. this afternoon. Taking us into the southwest part of the state, above freezing here as well, as will be expected with that warm southerly flow coming up. 35 there at McCormick, 36 at Bethel, in the mid 30s to right around 40 degrees for the Bristol Bay area, in the 40s along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, 46 at Unalaska. As we move out towards the central and western Aleutian Islands with that flow behind the cold front, a little bit colder there, 36 for Adak and 32 for Shemya, with mid-30s for the Pribilof Islands. So you look at our lows tonight, going to stay there in the mid-30s for a lot of the central and western Aleutian Islands, dropping down to the mid to upper 30s as we move closer to the Alaska Peninsula, into the mid-20s around Bristol Bay, mid to upper 20s for the YK Delta area. You can see a lot of these warmer temperatures following that warm front a little bit further of those inland locations, dropping down quickly as we get off into the central and eastern parts of the interior. But along the Seward Peninsula, dropping down into the mid-20s there, into the teens, north of the Kotzebue Sound, along the Arctic coastline, dropping down below zero for any of the locations that are east of Barrow. And they're actually going to be a little bit warmer than what we saw some of these afternoon temperatures, as we do have warmer air coming up even as far north as the Arctic coastline. Then as we move down into the south central area, we have temperatures dropping down into the teens, and in the Panhandle area, dropping down right around freezing for our locations in that area, with some locations like Yakutat getting a little bit colder there at 27 degrees. Highs for tomorrow getting back up above freezing into the mid to upper 30s. Sitka a little bit warmer, 42 degrees expected high for tomorrow. Mid-20s to mid-30s, warmest closer towards the Gulf for the south central locations. Mid-teens to mid-20s for the interior. Starting to see that warm push go now all the way into the eastern parts of the interior for tomorrow. Then we have temperatures in the teens primarily for the Arctic coastline. Arctic Village hanging on there, only getting up to -1 expected high for tomorrow. So we move down the western part of the state, getting up to around freezing for most locations of the Seward Peninsula, YK Delta, and Bristol Bay area. And then in the upper 30s to around 40 for the Aleutian Islands and for the Pribilofs. Switching gears now to our flight weather. With our system coming in from the western Bering, we do have some MVFR conditions expected for the western Aleutian Islands. But with our main front pushing through the state with all the snow, winds, and low ceilings coming into the area, we do have widespread MVFR conditions with a lot of IFR mixed in that, especially through the south central, central interior, and then up along the Arctic coastline. In the afternoon, it's going to clear up a little bit as some of that snow lightens up, but for the most part, we're going to have MVFR conditions throughout the interior, getting stronger again as we get out towards the west coast, especially around the Seward Peninsula area, with a lot of IFR mixed in with that as well. MVFR along the Arctic coastline, and now we're going to have some MVFR and IFR conditions move into the Panhandle area. Should be VFR for the most part for a lot of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. As we look at our passes, AKwx, we'll start off IFR, improve to MVFR, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both start off IFR and then improve to marginal conditions throughout the day. Rainy Pass expected to be IFR throughout the day tomorrow, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel will start off IFR but improve to marginal conditions later in the day, as well as Mentasta Pass. And Tanita similarly will be IFR and improve to MVFR conditions. Portage IFR improving to MVFR as well. And the only places to get worse throughout the day tomorrow, Chilkoot and White will both start off VFR, drop all the way down to IFR in the afternoon. For our freezing levels, you can see our main surface freezing line along the North Gulf Coast extending up into the northern Bering Sea. And we do have a warm push coming up behind our warm front, bringing in more warm air to the Gulf of Alaska. Looking at our icing, starting off near the Yakutat area, eastern parts of the Copper River Basin, above 4,000 feet expected there, stretching out over much of the interior down into some locations near the southwest, but below or between 2,000 and 8,000 feet. Then we have up along the Arctic coastline between 3,000 and 8,000 feet, stretching out towards the St. Lawrence Island area, above 5,000 feet expected there. And then out by the western Aleutian Islands between 2,000 and 6,000 feet. For our jet stream, we can see that we have a strong push, 130 knot jet, increasing to 150 knot jet, really bringing up that warm, moist air to the state. Another branch of the jet cutting through the western and northern parts of the Bering Sea at 150 knots there. Then we have our jet kind of missing to the southeast of the Panhandle area, about 130 knots there. Taking a look at 9,000 feet, strong westerly flow over much of the area. For the mainland part of the state, 45 to 50 knots expected. Maintaining that westerly flow over the Panhandle, 45 to 60 knots there. And then out over the Bering Sea area, we're still seeing that strong west or southwest flow, anywhere from 30 to 90 knots. The strongest is out over the western part of the Bering, northern part of the Bering, still pretty strong over the central part, but as we get closer to the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, dropping down pretty radically down to around 30 knots there. Taking us down to 3,000 feet, similar flow pattern, southwest flow becoming more westerly as we get closer to mainland Alaska. The weakest is again near the southeastern parts of the Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula area, around 25 to 35 knots there, but ramping up pretty quick to as high as 85 knots in the northern Bering, 80 knots as we get out towards the western Aleutian Islands. Out over mainland Alaska, seeing that westerly flow anywhere from 45 to 55 knots, maintaining through much of the mainland part of the state. As we get closer to the Panhandle area, 45 knots, dropping down pretty quickly to 25 knots as we move off into Canada. For our turbulence, as would be expected with a lot of these stronger winds, we do have quite a few areas of turbulence. Out over the south central area, including Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula, below 6,000 feet there. And our strongest will be with the strongest winds as we get over the Seward Peninsula area and right along the eastern coast in the Kotzebue and Norton Sounds. We could see some isolated severe turbulence in those areas below 6,000 feet. The moderate turbulence will extend throughout much of the interior out towards the upper Yukon Valley and then down south towards the YK Delta area. And this does include St. Lawrence Island. And then we have from the far western parts of the eastern Aleutian Islands all throughout the western Aleutian Islands below 4,000 feet expected there. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Highlights of the new year. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. There will be a lot of exciting astronomical events to experience in 2017.
That's right, James. In fact, we're going to have something so huge, so awesome next August 21st that I've been waiting my whole life to see it. I'm calling it the Big One, a total solar eclipse that will go across the United States of America.
We'll give you a quick preview of that awesome sight and show you what to look for in the sky during the first week of 2017, including the planets Venus and Mars, and you'll have a beautiful crescent moon on New Year's night.
Let's show you. Okay, we have our sky set to January 1st, 2017. Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
We're looking to the southwest at about 7 p.m. What an awesome sight you'll see on the first night of 2017. You'll have the waxing crescent moon just a few degrees from the brightest planet in the sky, Venus.
You've probably been seeing Venus all month, just after sunset, riding low in the sky. Every day this month, Venus will be getting closer and closer to the Earth.
That means it will get brighter and brighter, and it's already like crazy bright.
Higher and to the left of Venus, you'll spot a reddish object that barely twinkles.
Red doesn't twinkle? That sounds suspiciously like the planet Mars.
Exactly. Mars is getting further and further away from Earth each day, but you'll still be able to see it all the way through May, getting fainter day by day.
Now, let's fly up for a closer look at the moon. When the moon is a waxing crescent like this, you can sometimes see the unlit part of the moon as well.
This is called Earthshine, and it's caused by sunlight bouncing off the Earth and bathing the entire moon in a subtle glow that you can actually see.
But as the nights go on and we look at the moon throughout the month of January, we will see it get fuller and fuller day by day. This is called waxing. The moon will wax until it reaches a full moon on January 12th.
The day after the full moon, the light will slowly go away. The moon will start waning, and each night, less and less light will show up to us Earthlings until it reaches a slim, waning crescent moon. And then it will be gone from sight at new moon.
We can't normally see a new moon because it doesn't shine much light on us. And the sun is in the sky and appears right next to it.
But on one day this year, you have a great chance to see a new moon when it eclipses the sun. The date is Monday, August 21st, 2017. And Dehne, are you ready?
I was born ready.
Because on this date, everyone in the United States will be able to see part of the new moon block out part of the sun. This is called a partial solar eclipse, and it happens once every few years.
But if you're at the right place at the right time on a specific narrow path through our country, you'll be able to see the moon block out the entire sun. This total solar eclipse will make it look like the sun is gone.
It will get really dark.
Bright stars will come out.
The temperature will plummet.
And people will hoot and holler because we haven't had a total solar eclipse in the mainland U.S. since 1979. So get ready for this one. Plan out where you want to be on August 21st, 2017.
So start off 2017 with the moon, stars, and planets.
During the first week of the new year, look for the waxing crescent moon and the planets Venus and Mars.
And mark your calendars for August 21st, 2017 to see
the big one, the total solar eclipse. It's going to be a great and astronomical year, and you can see it all when you keep looking up.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look at the ice edge. Starting off with our area around St. Lawrence Island, we are seeing a lot of melting ice there with the strong and warm southwest flow. We are expecting to see that continue to diminish somewhat as we move into tomorrow. And then we do have areas around the Norton Sound area that have a lot of heavier ice there, and then some shorefast ice that could get broken up with the strong push, high winds, warm air coming up towards that area again with the coastal flood warnings that we have throughout the Norton Sound area up towards the Bering Strait area down through the Yukon Delta coastline, and for the St. Lawrence Island area. We are seeing those coastal flood warnings that are going to be in effect from 3 a.m. Friday till 9 a.m. Saturday, and that could be strong enough to push some of the ice onshore for areas of the southern part of the Seward Peninsula, and it does include the Nome area. Taking a look now at our marine forecast for southeast Alaska, we do have out over the Gulf westerly flow 25 to 35 knots, highest as we get further to the north with some gustier winds north of Sitka. And then southeast to southerly flow for the inside waters, 20 knots in the south up to 30 knots as we get further to the north. On Saturday, that flow is going to all become primarily northerly out over the Gulf side, 30 to 45 knots, strongest to the south, and starting to get gustier as we get closer towards Sitka and further to the south. Inside waters also northerly flow, 25 to 30 knots there. For the south central area, starting off westerly flow, strongest out over the Gulf up to as high as 40 knots there. In Prince William Sound area, northwest 35 knots. And then as you get into areas from Cook Inlet down through Shelikof Strait, going to see the weakest in northern parts of Cook Inlet, 20 knots, getting as high as 30 knots as we get closer towards the Barren Islands on Friday. Then on Saturday, going to see a mixture of flow, a lot of southerly flow coming up with 20 to 30 knots, highest out east of the Barren Islands into the Gulf area. But as we get closer towards Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, flow switching up, becoming light and northerly around 10 knots there. As we get out over the Alaska Peninsula, west to northwest flow, 20 to 25 knots, strongest Bering side, with seas 13 to 16 feet on the Pacific side, strongest there. As we move into Saturday, flow becoming more southerly, strongest on the Bering side up to as high as 45 knots out of that southeasterly direction. Seas still highest as we get on the Pacific side up to as high as 15 feet. For the Aleutian Islands, southerly flow becoming more southeasterly as we get further off towards the east, anywhere from 20 to 40 knots highest as we get further towards the central Aleutian Islands and on the Pacific side. Out by the western Aleutian Islands, even stronger there, southerly flow 45 knots, seas as high as 29 feet on Friday. Then on Saturday, flow becoming more southwesterly, but getting up to as high as 55 knots out over the western Aleutian Islands. So we move out towards the eastern Aleutians, southerly flow up to as high as 55 knots there, with seas as high as 30 feet, strongest on the Pacific side. So look at the west coast of the state, southwesterly flow 35 knots in the more southern locations, but as we get up towards St. Lawrence Island, around 50 knots there, seas as high as 35 feet, and that is to the west of St. Matthew Island. Then on Saturday, still going to see a somewhat southerly flow, strongest now near the Pribilof Islands at around 50 knots there, dropping down to as low as 40 knots as we get closer to St. Lawrence Island. As we look along the Arctic coastline, a southwesterly flow, weakest for the Beaufort Sea, but getting up to as high as 40 knots as we get to the western coast of the state. Then on Saturday, flow becoming more westerly, 20 to 30 knots for the western part of the Arctic as we get closer towards the Beaufort Sea, up to as high as 40 knots there. Quick recap for this state, we are going to see continued westerly flow out over mainland Alaska with widespread snow getting heaviest for the south central area overnight, and we are going to see a lot of winds throughout the interior part of the state, including western interior through the eastern interior, and we are going to see blowing snow conditions mixing in with the heavy snow for those locations. Still some snow out along the west coast, and we are going to see the winter storm warnings that are active throughout much of the northern part of the west coast through the Arctic coastline, and then we are going to see those extending out through the central and eastern parts of the interior. Those could be active as late as noon on Saturday, with the latest drop dead times out for the eastern parts of the interior, and some advisories for the south central area for some heavy snow there throughout tonight and early parts of tomorrow. Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.